live. Thank you to everybody that's tapped in. You are listening the He Nuh show on WINN Media 98.9, live streaming on YouTube, on Facebook, and on our social at He Nuh on Instagram. Today is Sunday, 16th October, and I am your host, one of your hosts, OLONZO Alexander, and I'm joined in studios by my co-host,
He Nuh.
ATIBA Byron. Yeah. Today, we are going to do a deep dive into something that we feel impacts everybody. There are, hurdles, the little hurdles that come up in life on a day-to-day basis and in any relationship, be it a business relationship, a personal relationship. One of the biggest hurdles that I've personally encountered, and I think ATIBA can attest, is the issue of accountability. Accountability is something that is a major hurdle in the development of relationships. So today, we're going to talk about it. We're going to discuss and see if we can tease out some of the issues that come up in relation to accountability and how those things can be resolved. So, where do we start? To me, I feel like accountability often gets conflated or mixed up with responsibility. And in my view, they are two different things. So I think responsibility is taking ownership of a task, or taking ownership of making sure that something happens. Accountability is taking ownership of the result. You agree? Disagree? How do you feel?
I think they're kind of one and the same.
No.
I feel that's how I feel. That's my feeling about it. Cause
accountability can't be the same as responsibility.
But you have to be responsible. You got to. It's like owning it though. That you could own how you made somebody feel, how the part that you played in something, and then you got to own that. That's like
that's accountability. Yeah. Recognizing your agency, I think.
Yeah. And you have to be responsible for your actions, right?
Yeah, you have to be responsible for your actions, but a lot of people aren't responsible for their actions, which is the lack of accountability.
So then the accountability is being responsible for your actions and the things that you might say.
Well, yeah, taking that responsibility for the outcome.
Mm.
So that's the responsibility, that's the accountability part, taking responsibility of the outcome. And a lot of people don't know that. That's the hard part of relationships, I feel. I think you have to take responsibility for the consequences of certain actions. So let me give you an example from a business perspective. Let's say there was a deadline, right? So you should have submitted, you're an architect. You should have submitted a drawing to a client on Friday. Today is now Sunday. The document hasn't been submitted.
Mm-hmm.
The client follows up with you, and you say to the client, "Oh, okay, you didn't follow up with me, so I wasn't sure if you needed it."
Mm-hmm.
Right? That is a lack of accountability. You know that you missed the mark. You know that you missed the deadline. But instead of saying, okay, hey, I apologize, I got overwhelmed with a few other projects that I was, undertaking, but I will send that to you by end of day today.
Mm-hmm.
That is accountability in my view.
Yeah.
Sidestepping it. So refusing to take that responsibility for the action or for whatever the hurt is, because that client might have required that submission to do something else, to submit it to the bank, to undertake some other part of the process. And your inability to deliver has caused them great discomfort or inconvenience. Those things damage relationships. And I think that's the biggest part of the failure to take accountability is the impact that it has on personal relationships. What's your view?
I think that the lack of accountability for me is saying like you apologize without changing, but don't change the behavior that caused the problem. Right? You're not acknowledging. That's like not acknowledging. Like somebody might say, you might say to him, let's say a partner, you made me feel this way by saying these things, right? X, Y, Z. And they say, sorry that you feel that way. Sorry that it made you feel that way. But tomorrow they do the same exact thing, say the same exact thing that made you feel that way, that caused a conflict, right? And they recognize that, it's an uncomfortable situation that created, but it's like, they say they apologize, but it wasn't really, they didn't mean it.
Because
hold on, you do have some people who apologize in the essence of just to get the conversation going forward. Like they just don't want to have this long conversation about whatever the issue is. So they prefer to just say, what, my bad, sorry. But it's not really like they accept any responsibility for what they said or what they did.
So they don't take ownership.
They don't take ownership of it.
So, sorry is more of a deflection.
Yeah.
It's just like, but then you see, so I guess it's levels to the failure of accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times you don't even get the sorry. Sometimes something happens in the relationship. Let's look at a personal relationship. Sometimes something happens that creates harm. So I do something, my partner feels hurt by what I've done or my failure to do, right? And she addresses it. And I say, oh, well, you didn't tell me X, Y, Z. Or we never had a conversation about. Or I expected you to know that. To me, that's a failure of accountability. And I think that's the most hurtful part about accountability or failing to take accountability, because it doesn't allow for the repair.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't allow for the other person, the person that feels harmed, it doesn't allow for them to say, okay, I could see where you went wrong and we could work through it, right? It's a lot harder when you're in a relationship on any level. So it might be business, it might be personal, on any level, where you're dealing with somebody and they don't take accountability for their own actions. They don't see how they've hurt you. It makes you think about the viability of said relationship.
Yeah,
so it might be...
It kind of breaks on the trust, right?
Right. It destroys the trust. So it might be, let's say it's a partnership, a business partnership, or you have an employee, and the employee messes up, and you ask them about it, and they deflect. They said, oh, no, that wasn't me. I don't know how that happened. It might have been somebody else. But you know that it's them. There are certain things that point directly to them. You know. You could tell. But they just refuse to own it. Then the trust on some level is destroyed. And it forces you as the person that has been harmed or has been inconvenienced to calculate whether or not you want to continue with that same dynamic. And oftentimes when things separate on that basis, the person that fails to take accountability also fails to see their part in the whole breakdown of everything.
Yeah.
That's the crazy thing.
Yeah, because it's almost like it's based on perspective, right? Because if your perspective is that you're not wrong, right? You are not going to talk, you're not going to take accountability for nothing. And if you go back and forth, it's almost like that same quote that we always talk about, what's a map to a king? What's a king to a god?
Right.
What's a god to an unbeliever? So it's almost like based on what the perspective you're at. Right? It's like, no, what you're saying don't make no sense. Like, my feelings come first, and how you make me feel. Like, sometimes in relationships, business and personal and intimate, sometimes somebody might do something, they don't understand that is the trigger point that started that cause a reaction. They're more looking at the reaction, and then they will kind of tell you in something to say the reason why they did this is because of something that you did, and now they want you to take accountability for their actions.
Break that down a little bit.
All right, let's say that let's say there's a sort of, it would be a manipulation, I would guess, of a situation, right? Where there's kind of break in communication, where you take action on something, and then but it causes a problem, it causes an issue between me and you, and I say, yo, the move that you just make ain't gelling well with me, and this is how it made me feel. But then you could say, man, I made that move because last week you said X, Y, Z, but you never brought it up to me.
Okay.
Right? So you made the move based on what you felt last week, and now it caused friction between us. But then you want me to take accountability because you're saying that the reason why you did what you did is because of me last week, but I have no awareness of that.
So I didn't communicate previously on wherever I felt like I recognized, and I used that as the basis to just make a move.
Yeah.
And now that you've mentioned to me that, hey, I don't like the move that you just make, is now why we revert into wherever happened the week before. Yeah. And again, those things are failures of accountability. From my personal experience, I kind of feel like people who refuse to take accountability have some type of inward, that it seems like persons who fail to take accountability have some issue with self-esteem. There is a complex of some sort. I don't know if it's an inferiority thing, right? So this is my perspective. I kind of feel like those persons that have those challenges with taking accountability, they feel like taking accountability is admitting to some type of moral failing, some type
Something
of flaw
wrong.
on their part, that they are wrong,
and they don't want to be wrong.
This terrible person, right? So they defend that with everything within them.
Let me ask you a question. You think parenting has something to do with some of that? Because like we kind of drill children sometimes and not being wrong, like always being right. So you you always got to be right, like you always got to be on point. So you could never be wrong.
I don't know if that particular thing is the trigger for it, but I think if you have, let's say, somebody that was brought up and the parents were hypercritical, or they just had issues with letting people down, because there are a lot of people who walk around and they just don't like that feeling, the feeling of letting someone down. So, are being wrong in whatever way. Because of that now, they become defensive. If you're defensive, you can't take accountability because it comes back to that same point of, okay, feeling like a flawed person. If I take accountability for this, it means that I'm a terrible person.
Okay, let me restructure that question in a different way. My sentiment in a different way. I was more like talking about parenting from the aspect of letting your children know it's okay to be wrong. Sometimes, it's okay to be wrong. The problem is that you're not gonna always be right, and it's okay to be wrong. But sometimes we might beat down on our children when they are wrong.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes them feel like they have to be perfect. So sometimes you front somebody and they're wrong, and they feel like like being wrong is not okay to be wrong.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's about wanting to be perfect. I think what you've referenced to me in my mind, it sounds like you force them to develop a defense mechanism because they see accountability as being equitable with punishment. So, if I own this, I don't get it. Consequences behind this thing. Mm-hmm. So if I own it, you're gonna beat me. So it makes sense I don't own it.
Yeah.
I could see that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. But then here's the thing. When those persons grow up with that same defense mechanism, right? It limits them in every aspect of life.
Yeah, definitely.
Because if you can't take accountability, or if you have issues with making a misstep, are failing on any level, then it puts you in a position where you're invariably going to refuse to try certain things because of that fear of failure, and you're going to respond negatively to anybody that points out, okay, hey, you could have done this better in that way,
Yeah.
right? That becomes a point of contention, and it destroys relationships. And here's the thing with accountability, and this is just from my personal experience. Sometimes it's not that you want to belabor a point or you want a big apology. Sometimes if I do something to you, you feel hurt, right? So you feel like I've harmed you. You mention it to me. It's something, sometimes it's just as simple as me saying, bro, yeah, I could see where you're coming from. You know what I mean? I was wrong. I should not do that.
Mm-hmm.
Done.
Done.
3 seconds, done. And the relationship is not necessarily all the way smooth, but in that accountability, you've developed a strengthening of the trust,
Yeah.
right? Because you know, okay, why? I could talk to him
Yeah.
when I feel away. But if I say, but what is he telling me? Man, nothing about that.
Yeah. You patch up a wound, you know?
Right. Right.
Versus laying the festo.
Of course. And those things happen a lot in business relationships. In, you know, as a leader of persons, I've seen it all the time, where team members feel like if they take accountability for where they failed or where they've made a misstep, they think it equates to them possibly losing their jobs or wherever it is, so they hide it, right? In relationships, your partner just doesn't want you to point out where they are being wrong, or where they've said something wrong, or where they've behaved in a way that you don't like. They don't take accountability for those things. And oftentimes the deflection sounds like, oh, well, I could not do anything else because of XYZ reasons.
Yeah.
I had to do this. I had to behave in this way because if I hadn't done this, you would have said this. I mean, and I know that sounds familiar to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
But how am I supposed to feel? Like, what am I supposed to do with that when you say that to me?
You know, and everybody doesn't, you know, do this strategy, but for me, a strategy for me, in like when there's a conflict, is to get all out. And I would, you know, like if the other person get all out too, because I want to take the information into consideration because I'm a thinker. So usually what happens is that when all information comes all out, everybody hold a position, nobody backing down, and then, you know, go in my own corner and try to think out everything that was said, right? The accountability part is now coming back and saying, hey, you know, I didn't look at, you know, XYZ this way. What you said there was right. And
yeah, but here's the curveball, though. I think, and this is me genuinely feeling this way, and I know me feeling this way isn't necessarily wrong because there are books that are written about these things. So you have Way of Superior Man, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. These books speak about the differences in the gender and how we have different perspectives, right? Or how we deal with conflicts in a very, very, very different way. I feel like as men, we try to look at things from a purely logical perspective, like what makes sense, A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, right? How does it line up in reality? And women often look at things from an emotional perspective. Okay, how did it make me feel? What could have been your potential feelings behind saying what you said? So they try to place themselves within your mind almost to see where you could have possibly been coming from. And sometimes that's not even the case. Like, there was no feelings on your part, but they interpret or they adhere some type of feelings to it. And then they operate on that basis. Like, oh, you only said it because you felt this way. And I'm just like, what? I said it because it's the truth. Like, that's exactly what it was. But we end up in these divergent positions, and as a man, you might be standing on, okay, listen, I told you that the room is yellow. Oh, no, but I was telling you that it's not really yellow. It's some other thing, some other color. And you're just like, what? what are you talking about? And you're only saying yellow because your mother, and it's like, and so there's this different perspective that you can't really grasp. As a man, you can't really hold on to where it's coming from. So the lack of accountability could come from a lot of different areas. But my feeling is, I think as people, if we're looking at things in a holistic way, we have to realize that regardless of whatever your motivation is for saying what you're saying or doing what you're doing, accountability allows for the repair, right? Accountability is foundational to any relationship. If you want to build a strong relationship, accountability is very, very necessary.
Yeah, I mean, an apology, like what I was saying before, like the apology goes a long way. Like coming back to something that, that we had a discussion about something and you didn't feel good about it. You left the conversation feeling the way that you feel. And if the person come back and admit to you, like, yo, what you were saying was right. I didn't look at it from that perspective. I understand now. And you made a necessary adjustment. That goes a long way for any relationship, whether it's personal, business, intimate. But it's hard for people to, like I said, people don't like to be wrong.
But the thing is, accountability is the key to transformation in any relationship, though. Because we could be going down a particular road in a relationship. Like I could feel a certain type of way about you. And once you start taking accountability in a real way, I could feel like, okay, he is or she is looking at this thing in a very sober manner. Then I feel a lot better about having any conversation with you. Because I feel like you're being open. I feel like you're being honest with me. That failure of accountability means that you're in a fixed position. You're rigid. You don't want to hear anything I have to say, right? You fail to take accountability. That deflection is a deflection of my feelings as well. So you've deflected my feelings. Oh, I don't care how you feel. This is how I see it, and this is what I'm sticking with. How does that lend itself to? And oftentimes, you could feel, I mean, especially as some of my experiences, I can articulate exactly how I feel, right? I can identify my feelings, reconcile them, and articulate, okay, hey, this is how I feel, this is why I feel how I feel, and this is where I think what you've done led to me feeling how I feel. And then you said to me, oh, no, but last week. It's just like, what? We ain't talking about last week, we're talking about now.
But you see, and it's so crazy because let's say the feeling that you have, it might feel strong within you, right? But let's say that the feeling that the person made you feel that way, and actually, like, they do feel the way that they feel, right? But the feeling could be right, but it could be, come from a different place that has nothing to do with you. Like you might rub on somebody's insecurities, and something you said trigger that insecurity, but you don't even, that wasn't your aim, right? And sometimes they might have like some hidden trauma or whatever they have in the past, whatever, they might trigger that, and you might not be aware of that. And they might rub on that, so then do you feel like you should take accountability for how that person feel? And then that person got to take accountability and look within themselves. Like, I mean, we done had conversations where sometimes you feel away and you got to look, I wonder why I feel the way I feel.
Right.
Introspection.
Right. But so then here's the thing. That's very, very important in my view. That ability to take that introspective look at yourself, to sit with whatever the occurrence was. And it doesn't have to happen in the moment, because we know sometimes in the moment things are heated and you're so impulsive that you say and do certain things and you fly off the handle. Okay, cool. And I've been guilty of that. But do we then look at it and say, okay, this is how I responded in the moment. That response was probably wrong. I can see why they were saying how they feel. Okay, I was wrong. I could say that I was wrong. I could say that I wasn't 100% right. Because, there's a spectrum. Sometimes you're not all the way wrong, but there's some parts of it that was wrong.
Yeah.
And sometimes the person is dead wrong, or sometimes the person is all the way right. So you have to be able to kind of analyze whether the occurrence or situation was and say, okay, where was I failing? Where did I have a misperception? Did I listen to this person and hear exactly what they were trying to communicate to me? Sometimes when you're in your feelings, you can't do that. You know what I mean? You shut off all input, the only thing that's valid is what's coming from your internal space. That could break down a relationship easy. Because people need to feel like they're being heard, right? That's the biggest thing in relationships, like, especially women. So I'm talking from the masculine perspective. Women like to feel like they're being heard. So if you're going to deflect and dismiss her feelings and say, okay, what you're saying ain't making no sense to me. Yeah. But I mean, and I get into problems with that all the time.
You know, the other side of the accountability is the other person receiving the apology and know how to receive it with grace, you know, because sometimes you might go to somebody and you might apologize. And you come to them now vulnerable, like, hey, you know, I made a mistake, right? The next other person shouldn't say, I don't tell you, you're stupid. You know what I mean? Like, they start going into you, so they make you feel even uncomfortable coming, you know, to take accountability for certain things. Like, you rather just keep it within you, quiet, make the adjustment and don't say nothing.
But then, again, that's on a spectrum as well, because how do you apologize? If you make light of the situation, because people do this a lot, the moment was very intense. A lot of things were said.
Yeah.
X person goes away, does that introspection, realizes that they were wrong, but then they come back sheepishly. You ain't talking to me. We ain't got to fall out for that. And you get me? Like, that's not what's required in that moment.
Yeah,
especially if you know your partner. Yeah. So sometimes the apology isn't really an apology. Sometimes the apology is a pacification of self.
Yeah.
And the apology has to be an apology. The apology has to be directed to the other person. I feel like the apology has to deal with a suppression of your own feelings and just being, like you said, vulnerable. So you coming to me after you've made me feel terrible and laughing and giggling and smiling and you ain't talking to me. We ain't friends no more. Like, you know what I mean? In that kind of goofy roundabout way. That doesn't always work for everybody. And I'm not saying that it's completely wrong. It might work for some people. But then there are other persons who need like that kind of sober, direct dialogue where you come to them and you say, hey, you know, we had a discussion just now and I thought about it. I understand what you're saying. I was wrong. Sorry.
But you know what would temper that out? If the person came to you, somebody came to somebody like in that playful way, but the apology isn't the change behavior. So let's say the consistently they will come with that same kind of, oh, well, we ain't friends no more. But they consistently show like a change of behavior towards whatever was, you know, I mean, like they really adjusted. And you could see the adjustment easily. Then you would get past that part. But when some people come to you, like, you know.
But here's the thing though. Yeah. So not to cut the wisdom. But here's the thing. The change behavior part of it is on a longer time spectrum. So the change behavior part of it is a recognition that happens over days, weeks, months.
In some instances, it could be, you know, it could be instant.
Give me an example of an instant change behavior, like a scenario that you could see an instant change behavior.
Let's say you boil up to a point and you curse at your partner.
Right.
And she's saying when things kind of calm down, she says to you, he says
she don't like the cursing.
She don't like the cursing part. You know, that could be an instant change.
Okay, that's something that you could lock off.
That's something you could lock off
right away.
Right, depending on how strong you resolve. That's something you could lock. So some stuff is instant and some is long term.
Okay, but again, the instant might be we have a tense discussion next week, and because it's so close to that conversation that we had, you register that you're not supposed to swear in that moment, but in a month from then. You know what I mean? Because cursing is a habit.
Some people, I mean, it goes based on the person's resolve in terms of how to manage certain things.
Yeah.
Because you could reach a point where you don't want to curse, but it's just like, you know, I mean, there's no one do it. You know, like you just hold it back.
And I consider. But I think a big part of it too, a big part of accountability is understanding what your partner needs to see and hear and feel, right? Because if you're with this person on a consistent basis, you have to know what type of communication gets through to them. So you can't expect to be the type of person who's going to think, okay, this is my style of communication, and they have to accept it. And I feel like that happens a lot in relationships as well.
And I mean, in the relationship sense too, sometimes you to me, majority of the times, for it to be kind of balanced, in a weird way, you kind of have to put your partner first.
It's a give and take.
You kind of, the majority of the times you got like 80-20, you got to put them first. You got to put them first because it's almost like you're saying, like you receive love the way that you receive it. Let's go back to the trees. They love languages. Like you receive love, you see love differently, you receive it differently, but that might not be the way that they receive it. So but if you put them first, and you could see, like if you could see them for who they are, then you could love them and address them in that way too, rather than addressing them the way that you want to be addressed. So it's like you're putting them first in certain instances where, you know what I mean? But once it's about relationship building.
Again, listen, there's a lot of layers to relationships, building relationships with other human beings, because you could also have a situation where somebody is an overachiever. Like they have very, very high ideals, very, very high standards, right? And they understand that, okay, how you engage with them is important to how they feel about themselves and how they're going to settle down in life. Because there are persons who are casual, and then there are persons who are very intentional about how they do things, right? So you have introverts, you have extroverts, you have persons who are comfortable going to the supermarket in just a big dress with Clorox stains and a bonnet on the head and no brassiers, right? You have women who are comfortable doing that. Now, you may have a man who is very studious, very structured in his life, and he doesn't go to the supermarket in that way. He happens to be in a relationship with a woman that has those tendencies. That's how she's grown up. She's learned that from, let's say, her mother, right? Does she have to change to be with him? Should he accept her going to the supermarket in that way? No. I feel like that change is required. That adjustment is required.
But suppose the man is the one who got to now adapt and pour on the Clorox pants and go to the store without a brief on.
No, I think human beings are inclined to what is beneficial. So what's beneficial about that? But
maybe she might not feel so bad for the relationship. She might feel like, okay.
It's normal. It's normal. So I hear the argument. The argument is, okay, you're going to the supermarket a little bit too polished. We could relax. You could put on a sweatpants. You ain't have to wear an underwear like you're saying. Yeah. You could have on a shirt with holes in it. We ain't dressing up for anybody. That could be the argument. But it depends on his perspective through life. So what if his perspective is, hey, we're going into the supermarket based on the space in which I operate predominantly. I deal with business persons. Somebody in the supermarket is going to stop me and say, hey, hello, how are you? Try to talk shop, try to talk business, try to engage with me. I might be trying to build a network. So
you see, and I think that's because the context is like on such a small island.
Exactly.
Because in a bigger area,
it's like different.
It's different because like none of that really matters.
Again, it comes to understanding the nature of the beast.
Because you may have some people here, that they're born on this small island and they don't really have like certain ambitions, so they're not really looking at life from that context. So it can make them feel a little out of place.
Right,
like,
but then so here's the thing.
But then sorry not to cut you, but it's almost like you might be forcing them to change into something that they don't want to be at all.
So then we get into the area of incompatibility, right? Because are we compatible then? If you don't want to change, but I want to change, and let's say, okay, so here's the scenario. You are that guy, right? Who is very structured, you understand the interactions. You are going to the supermarket and you have to present yourself in a certain way because, you know, you might bump into this CEO or this lawyer or this person who is going to want to have a conversation with you, right? And you understand small island culture. So people are going to, oh, look at how he was dressed in the supermarket. I don't want to be associated with that. That is a dominant narrative. Okay, so he understands that. He understands how he shows up, how he presents himself to the world is important. But she doesn't because of, let's say it's the confinement. Let's say she's grown up, her parents have consistently operated in this way.
But it might be just a personality thing because
No, but the reason why it isn't really what I was getting at. So the reasoning is the reasoning. Whatever her reasoning is
That's
her reasoning.
reasoning, yeah.
They're in the relationship, and he is trying to show her or explain to her, this needs to change for XYZ reasons. So there is clear communication on that part. But she doesn't see it. She doesn't see the necessity of it. Then that is a very rigid stance. And I feel like this is just me personally. Then you get into that area of, are we compatible?
But you see, I think both stances are rigid. I think because for me, it could sound and feel restrictive from you kind of like being yourself. Like, this is who I am, right?
But is who you are a good thing? But in that context?
But who you are, right? But you might have a vision of how you want to be as a person and how you want people to receive you that doesn't really align with let's say, your partner. Right?
So then that's what I'm saying. We get to that space where you start to wonder if you are compatible.
I don't think it's a compatible thing. It's almost like you just don't fit the mold that I want for myself.
Compatibility.
But
you're incompatible.
But not incompatible because there is a reason why you kind of got into the relationship and there was things that were compatible. Like everything else could be on point. Like let's say the lady is a good caretaker. You know, she works hard. Let's say she's an honest person. And everything kind of checks off, but just that when it comes to appearances and stuff like that, that she's just not really interested in that because that's not her ambition or vision, right? So it's not really like a compatible thing after the point. It's just like, I don't really share the dream that you have.
Wait, but then when we get into relationships as people, are we set, are we fixed, or do we evolve? Because I know you can think of relationships that you've gotten into that have forced you to evolve. I know you've met persons in your life that have forced you to look at the world or look at the way that you do things differently.
Yeah, but there's a thing about a natural evolution. You can't really force it. Like force wiping something, it ain't gonna taste good.
Right. So then, okay, but so then it comes down to if something is a priority for you, right, and it is not a priority to your partner. Now, priority meaning it's very high on your value chain, but it's not a priority for your partner. And your partner is reluctant or outright refusing to adjust, right? But you see it as a small adjustment that can be made for the relationship because we are talking about something as simple as, you know what I mean, being a little bit more intentional with how you step out. But the argument is, I'm comfortable, I've been doing this and I don't see the need to change.
Mm-hmm.
That's a small enough sacrifice from my perspective to make for the relationship.
Yeah, but sometimes what seems simple for one person could seem very scary for the other person, regardless of how you think it is. Like it looks simple, but it might be scary. As simple as sitting down and learning a new software, right? For one person, that is like, okay, that's a no-brainer. I'm gonna go and do it. It's easy. It's easy to learn anything you want to learn. Just go on YouTube and learn it. But for somebody else, it's a big challenge. That's a big challenge.
Yeah, but then that is where you have persons that come along in life, I feel, and they guide you along a particular path, and they make the adoption of certain things easier. Because you might be in a fixed mindset. You might feel like learning this software is a very, very difficult thing. And this person can continue to nudge you and say to you, okay, hey, you're looking at it this way. Okay, try this. Do this on Monday. Press this button, hit those keys, pull this to the left, do all of these things, and you try it. It's about being open. When you're in a relationship, I feel you have to be open, because if you see something means a lot to your partner,
Yeah.
then you have to be open to making those changes. Now, not saying that your partner is in control of your life, but if something is a justifiable change. So if your partner is telling you, okay, hey, I know you don't smoke, but I'm a smoker and I need my partner to be a smoker, so you need to start smoking. Oh, that's totally ridiculous. So that is something that I can't understand you're taking a hard stance on. But if you're in a relationship, your partner is trying to build themselves into something. They have an ideal, right? And they want you to adjust certain things that they feel don't necessarily fit into that ideal. So maybe it's going out and liming 3 days a week and drinking and coming home drunk, and they're uncomfortable with that. Or going to the supermarket dressed in what is in their view poorly, and they want that to be adjusted. I don't see that as something that should allow the relationship to be damaged.
Yeah, I mean, if a partner comes to you and say, okay, I didn't grow up this way. I have these dreams, these ambitions, and I think that I need your help in order to achieve these things. So they kind of let you know, it's almost like, okay, I want to lose weight, and I want you to hold me accountable, right, through this process, because you're in shape, and I always see you exercising. I see where you're at, and I would like to reach there. That's a different conversation now. But let's say that your partner ain't have no issues with their weight. They feel okay with how they are.
Right, but you don't, as the partner.
But you, as a partner, looking on and saying like this,
You need that. Okay.
this doesn't match.
Let me understand. So you feel like, as the partner, you feel like they need to change. You feel like, based on their weight, you feel like they're overweight, let's say.
Let's say,
And they don't feel that way.
and they don't feel that way.
Okay.
It's a lot easier when you have the conversations, I guess, with your partner. Like if you have certain visions for yourself, you can ask them questions to see if they have the same idea about, about life, because chances are that they never had a chance to think about it. Nobody ever asked them the question to think about it.
Yeah, but I feel like sometimes life is very dynamic, and you don't have everything that happens in that very structured way. So it's not always that your partner is going to come and say to you.
They're not going to always come.
So it might be.
That's why you can ask a question.
Right, but it might be your partner says to you, okay, hey, listen, I really don't like the weight that you're putting on. I think you need to start working out. Right?
That's fine.
It might not be that conversation that's very detailed and say, I have this vision for my life and
No. I just talking about like, it doesn't always have to be a person approaching you. You could approach them as well, because you might have a partner who loves to cook, always cooking, and they hand bad, baking, anything they could do in their bad, but they never thought about making it into a business. And you might be somebody who ambitious in that sense. You understand business. You could see this as as a viable product, and you say, hey, you ever thought about making a business out of this? And they never thought about it. But that alone just kind of like resonates with them, and they say, yeah, okay, let's try it, right? That's a lot more easy. You'll find less resistance, I guess, in having certain conversations and really getting to know who your partner, like what their vision is, by asking them like questions, and over time, getting to know them, because people adjust over time, right?
But sometimes you have the best of intentions, and because of, it might not be a value system, but because of certain mechanisms that people have developed in their mind, and it might come from parenting, it might come from wherever. You making suggestions could feel like manipulations to them, could feel like you're leading them, and just inherently they feel like they have to challenge you. They feel like they have to push back against it. And in your mind, it's just like, hey, I'm trying to help you. We are not enemies. And I saw a post like that recently where the guy was saying,
we're on the same team.
Right. We are on the same team. I am not against you. Oftentimes in relationships, and I could speak to this, you feel like you have to fight to get adoption of something, or you feel like you have to coerce or convince your partner that what you're saying is in our best interest, is not in my best interest. it doesn't necessarily help me. It helps you, but if it helps you to become better, it also helps me because we're in this together. That does not always seem to be the view. And that comes from, I don't know where the resistance comes from.
You see, because I mean, with people, it's kind of hard to decide like which view is the right view.
What do you mean?
Like you could hold on to a view that okay, that money is everything,
Okay.
and your partner could hold on to a view that money ain't everything, right? And both views could be right,
Both views could be valid.
could be valid.
Right.
Like both views could be valid, but where is the middle ground?
But I feel like that's what we need to find, especially if you have those types of very intense viewpoints. So if you feel like, okay, hey, we need to save, because there are some persons who just like to see a lot of money bank up in their account. Like they love to go into their account and hit the ATM and get that receipts that says there's $160,000 on your account, right? But you might be somebody that's thinking, hey,
Invest.
right, I'm comfortable with $30,000 being on the account, but we have all of these different assets. And your partner might not be willing to do that because spending money oftentimes feel like a loss for some people, especially if they grow up in certain households. And you have a conversation with them, but they refuse to look at it from your viewpoint. They are rigid, they're fixated. Whatever their stance is, that's their stance. And there's a failure to even view it, even look at it, even try to conceptualize or understand what you're saying to them. That makes a relationship hard to endure.
I mean, sometimes they can't see.
But then, so then that comes right back again to compatibility from my perspective. Because if I feel this strongly about this thing and I know this thing is right, I know this aids us. I could sit with you and I could say, okay, hey, listen, I know you like the look of the money, or you've been working hard to save this money. But if we invest, and it's not a solo investment, I am going to contribute X amount of funds as well. If we invest, then we own the land, we own gold, we own whatever the assets is, we invest in stock. You're not necessarily cash rich, but you have assets. So now, when you're talking about inflation and all of these different things, you're not affected the same way because the value of money now isn't going to be the same value of the money 5 years from now because inflation takes away a percentage. So, but if the partner can't understand that because they're just so fixated, oh, my grandmother used to save, and she tell me save me money.
But then that begs the question, right? Do you believe that as a partner that you should do everything with your partner? Because maybe you're not compatible with this one part of the relationship. And if this one part incompatible, does it mean that the whole relationship is incompatible?
So, why? You see that question there? That question is something that I've been pondering recently, and it's a new realization for me.
Because, not to cut you, because I ask you this question. Let's say, using the same saving analogy, like you might be a partner that wants to save, and the other one wants to invest. Let's say the person that likes to save, take a chance and come into the comfort zone and give you the money to invest, which is you believe, and then you lose all the money.
Right.
That person is liable to say, you see, I don't tell you so.
Right.
And then how would you respond to that as if, you see what I'm saying? So then it's just like, how about, okay, if we're on the same team, that means your win is my win, vice versa. So you saving is my saving as well. Like we win in both ways, right? So, okay, I can go 100% into what I'm dealing with, and I'm not even going to ask you to get involved in it because if I win, you win still.
But it's not always that way because people have different value systems. So I understand, right? That now I think I'm getting to a place where you realize some persons, and it could be your partner, it could be a brethren, it could be whatever it is, whatever the personal feelings are, I don't think that necessarily equates to meaning that person is somebody that you could do business with, right? We cool, I love you, whatever the vibe is, but we can't necessarily do business.
You know, compatible in that part.
Right, because I have different standards when it relates to business.
Yeah.
And you don't seem to meet my value system.
Yeah.
If we get into business together, it is going to destroy the personal relationship that we have. That's something I am now realizing, because I felt like, okay, hey, you know what I mean? Because I am good at articulating how I feel, I could get into business with these people, and you know, you see certain values in people and you feel like, okay, these things will be beneficial, but there are little things that pop up from time to time, and money and business changes people. And people also create attachments to things, and they become defensive about the things that they've created attachments to, right? And that could be detrimental. So, to the question that you asked, no, I don't think that I could. I think, well, so it's not that I couldn't, but I think there should be some separation between your business and your personal life.
Definitely.
And I am going to create that in my life, because I've seen where business and pleasure
Don't mix.
right, they don't necessarily mix. I mean, there are some persons who do it well.
Talk about accountability, you know? I mean,
There are some persons who do it well, but there are other persons who they don't take accountability for their actions. And it all comes down to accountability as well.
you know, I remember years back, I think I was in college or after, there was this couple, two architects,
Right.
and successful in their own right, but they couldn't do business together. So they had like their own separate business because they had different standards.
Also, there are different firms.
I think they had different firms. And they used to kind of collaborate here and there, but the business-wise, they're not really intermingling. And they were like an old couple in the 80s, I think, 70s, 80s. And they said that will work for them. Because I think sometimes that we get sold on this thing about power couples and stuff like that.
What I think it is if you're going to get into that kind of dynamic, it has to be understood that we are not equal, especially in business. So let's say you're getting into business with your partner has to understand that they're playing a supportive role. And it could be that, okay, hey, the woman is amazing at design. So you create an interior design studio, right? If you have that illusion of equality going into it, then the man feels justified in questioning the woman's decisions. And I feel like that's where a lot of the conflict will come from. But if he goes into it understanding that, hey, the final decision is hers, and he knows, bro, you're playing a supportive role, you're here because we're partners and I love you and you're going to source materials and do all of these different things, but the final interaction with customers, all the decision making, if we take a deal or if we don't take a deal, is mine. That's clear. That's set in stone at the beginning. I feel like those things kind of stand up a little bit more sturdy. But I feel like in relationships, if you allow the personal relationship, the intimacy, the fact that we sleep together at nights to kind of commingle or get mixed in with the business, so there's always a discussion about what direction we go in terms of the business, then you disrupt one of the fundamental laws, which is unity of command. You must have one clear commander. And if you don't have a clear commander, because we're going to have divergent views at some point.
Yeah, and, you know, I guess it's like different departments, when it comes to the relationship, like you got like, and it could interchange, you know what I mean, in terms of who's going to take the lead on certain things and be okay with that, because then it boils down to trust.
And it comes down to another problem as well, where, you know what I mean, let's say, as a man, you feel like you understand things to a particular level and you want to make the decisions, but your partner has a divergent view. They see it differently, right? It must be clear that if you take this decision and it fails, you also take ownership. You're also accountable for that.
Yeah,
Right? But when we mix up, when it's the mix up and we fail, it's on you, but then the person points it and throws it in your face in a way, like, oh, I did tell you don't do that. No, you can't tell me not to do it. Just like if you have your own business, I won't tell you what to do.
You gotta say like tough luck, next time.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So,
move on like a team, because that's what the team
exactly.
you're taking your shot.
So we approach these things in a mature way, and I feel like relationships sometimes remove some of that maturity. Just inherently, like, because you're so close, because you're so bonded, because there's that intimacy, it makes things a little bit cloudy. So, because I'm heavy on creating a foundation for my family at this stage. And those are things that I have to think about. And I feel like everybody should be thinking about that. Like, how do you go into this next chapter?
Yeah.
How do you build the legacy that you're thinking about building or trying to build? And is the person that you're close to, are they suited for the level that you're at or the level that you're going into? Because sometimes it's very high level stuff, right? And maybe your partner just can't conceptualize it, or they need more growth, or they need more whatever it is. And those are conversations that are very uncomfortable, but I think they need to be had.
I mean, and it boils down again to, being accountable, because I think if a person doesn't have the vision that somebody has, right, but they have enough accountability in their actions and things they say, and, they could be vulnerable and they could express certain things, kind of show you like a space to grow. It's almost like you're having a conversation sometimes. Something I had to learn, I think, in high school. I was talking to my father, and he was telling me something, and I said, I know.
Yeah.
And he said, listen, that's a bad thing to practice in business. And I wasn't even thinking business then. He said, that's a bad thing for business, right? Like, don't ever say you know and you don't know, right? It's okay to don't know. So, but it's a natural reflex for us down here, that something that I grew up saying, like, I know, like, I know.
Yeah, no, I've experienced that a lot. And we had that conversation, I think it's last week, with the doctor.
Yeah.
The doctor was saying, like, your cup has to be empty.
For it to be useful.
Right, for it to be useful. If you have a full cup, there's no utility in the cup because the cup is already full.
Yeah.
So you need an empty cup. And knowing, if you are knowing, then no knowledge is useful to you.
You understand? So sometimes you step into a situation, whether it be relationship, intimate, personal, like, you don't know. So you gotta sit back and be empty. Like, there's this thing about working, like, in my field, that you go into a company and you're gonna learn their standards, like the layering system and all that. But then you go to a different company and it's a total different layering system that you have to learn. But you have to unlearn. You can't even come in and say, well, this is how we're accustomed to do it. You have to relearn it.
Yeah, right. And it's about being flexible, right? It's about being flexible. So back to the relationship tip. And sometimes we see those things in relationships early on. Like, you might be in a relationship with somebody. So you might be a female and you're in a relationship with a guy. And you just realize, like, you can't really tell him anything. He refuses to hear anything you have to say. Why would you go into a business, a partnership on that level with that person where money is involved and you have to satisfy customers, you have customer expectations, all of these things. If the communication is messy, if the internals are messy, right? Those things still need to be sorted out. What makes you feel like it's going to be clear on the business tip? What makes you feel like you'll be able to run an effective business together if you can't even talk when you're at home?
Yeah.
And these are things that I feel like people don't necessarily look into. So to the question of building businesses or partnerships as a couple, those things are always dangerous. Those things are always dangerous because most relationships are tumultuous, and not in a bad way.
Yeah.
Relationships have ebbs and flows. We've said this before. And in a relationship, you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. There are going to be days that you're frustrated with your boyfriend or your girlfriend. And then there are going to be days where you feel like she or he's the best thing ever. Okay? But how does that translate into business? Because a lot of us feel like we're mature, but sometimes we're not that mature. Sometimes if you have a business that you co-own and you had a bad day, so you both woke up on the wrong side of the bed because you had an argument or whatever it is, you get into the office or the business, it's very easy for that to bleed into that part of the operation, right? So these are things that we have to think about. And if you're looking at shaping your life in any real way, then these are considerations that have to be made.
And it boils back down to the same thing we started off with, which is accountability. Because I think that seeing people take accountability is a refreshing thing always.
Yeah.
Especially when they change the behavior and it's just not an empty sorry.
And it makes you fall in love with them a little bit more.
You
To
definitely.
be completely honest, like if you have somebody that you can have a hard time with, like we
Hard
we had a
conversation, hard talk.
conversation, you know what I mean, and you leave that conversation feeling terrible, but then you know, okay, listen, and it doesn't have to be right away. It could be a day or two after they come back and they say, hey, listen, that conversation that we had 2 days ago, I thought about it, and some of the things that was said, I don't really feel like I feel that way. I feel like I was wrong in certain areas. While I don't see where you were coming from on X, Y, Z, I could see that I was wrong here, and I'm sorry.
That's emptying the cup.
Right.
To
And
get
then, so
replenish.
we get to rebuild because now it's almost like you're running blocks for your foundation. One of the blocks got broken, and you still run under. If you still run blocks continuing with that same broken block, your foundation shaky. But if you take out that block, which is more work, right? It's harder because you now have to go dig out all of the grout and all the stuff, all the cement, and change out that block and put in a fresh block. Well, at least you know when you cast off and you start to build now. When you get to the roof pad, you know your foundation firm. So accountability is very important, guys. But as usual, we've gotten to the end of the show. You have been listening to the He Nuh Show on WINN Media 98.9. We are live streaming on YouTube, on Facebook, and on our Instagram at He Nuh. So tap in, add us, link up. To everybody that's been listening, thank you for the constant support, and we will see you next week.
Yeah.
Have a good evening.
You found the sound. 98.9. WINN FM.
We now bring you the WINN